Hi, I'm Donna Wittry.
And I'm John Wittry. Welcome back to our living room. We are really excited to be here with you again today. I want to kind of give a an overview of where we've been, and so you have some context for what the video is today. So if you remember, what you've signed up for is top 10 big ideas for optimal happiness and success in a relationship. And our commitment to you is to give you our top 10 big ideas for having that happiness and success in your relationship. The first video was an overview of all top 10 tips. So if you watched that first video, what you saw us do is walk through each one and give you a brief introduction to each of our top 10 big ideas. And then the subsequent videos are a deep dive on each one of those. Essentially, we're giving you the top 10 tips for all top 10 tips. So you're going to come away with 100 different things that you can do to optimize your relationship. That's pretty good. The second video in it, so where we started with the top 10 ideas, was choosing into your relationship, choosing in every day. The next one that we went to was actually a deep dive on meeting your partner's needs. And then the third one was serving one another. With each of those, we gave you homework. So for each of those videos, I want to remind you that you actually had homework to do, and there was some extra credit with that homework. And I'll also be honest with you, I was on my walk this morning and I realized I had a sense of frustration because when we give our coaching clients homework, we have the experience of getting to review that homework with them and how they did and where they were able to get to with that homework, where their stumbling blocks were. So I realized I had a sense of frustration that I'm not in communication with any of you around what you've run into with that homework. So I wanted to give you an invitation. If you have any questions or feedback or just insights into the homework, you can email us at dnnwittry, that's DNNWITTRY, @gmail.com. Any questions that you have, any comments, we'd love to hear your feedback. In particular, I'd love to hear how the homework's going because that's really meaningful to me. Today, we're going to be doing love language. So the video today is on how to speak one another's love language. And I want to set the context for today's video in this way. Imagine if you had made a choice to visit another country, and you were your intention was to do a total immersion into that country. You were going to be there for 3 or 4 weeks. You wanted to experience the food. You wanted to really understand and be part of the culture. So less of a tourist and more of a participant. The likelihood of you learning the language of that country, at least at a basic level, is incredibly high. Because that's actually what it would take to really experience being a part of that land and a part of that culture. So what we're talking about today in this video is the exact same thing, except the foreign land is your relationship. And what we want to highlight is that all of us have a love language that we speak in. And when we get into relationship with one another, it's really important to learn the language of that other person. So today is really all about love languages. And I will say that in Donna and I's relationship, you know, there are some things that have just made a dramatic difference for us, you know, in the 30 years that we've been married.
Basically learning this concept of what a love language is and how to interpret your spouse's love language has made a world of difference in our frustration level with each other.
And this is one of those things that I will tell you, there's a lot I haven't mastered in relationship. There's a lot that I haven't mastered. Did I say there's a lot that I haven't mastered in relationship? But this is one of the things that we continue to practice, and we have to continue to remind ourselves to speak the right language to one another. So why don't we dive in?
Okay, so number one is the place that we started as a couple was we got a hold of Gary Chapman's book called The 5 Love Languages. And so we highly recommend that people go out, you know, purchase it wherever you get it, online or wherever you're going to get it, and just start reading the book and use that as a launching pad for learning about the 5 love languages.
This is one of the books that we have as almost required, well, not almost, as required reading for all of our coaching clients. So, you know, there's just some books you should have on your shelf as it relates to relationship. And the five love languages by Gary Chapman is one of them. The five, look, this isn't the truth, so I always want to be careful about presenting information. This is really important information, and it's not the truth. And so in Gary's book, he outlines what he has identified as five love languages.
Which doesn't mean that that's all there is.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you fall into one category and not the other, or that, there's no overlap. It just kind of boils it down to, some of the top five.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject of books, and we're going to dive into the five love languages here in a second, just a kind of a sidebar is, if you are really committed to having a loving long-term relationship, I would challenge you to go to your bookshelf and look at what books are on your bookshelf. So I was in an office of a colleague of mine, and he's a profound guy in leadership, just a profound guy in leadership. And I looked at his bookshelves, and it was all on leadership. And so I'm always intrigued by people's bookshelves because, so he is a profound leader, but there are some relationship challenges that he's experiencing, and there were no books on relationship. So I called him on it. You got to know me pretty well, but I called him on it and just said, look, if you really want to have an effective relationship, you have to study it like anything else. Gary Chapman's book would be a great place to start.
Yeah. I
So
agree.
tip number 1, read The Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman.
So tip number 2 is to identify your own love language from the 5 that Gary Chapman recommends looking at.
Do you want me to give you a test? What are the 5, honey?
Well,
She's cheating. She's got them written right over there.
I have notes. It's giving gifts. If you shower other people with words, if you use some sort of touch, if you like to spend quality time with others, do you do service as a way to show your love to people?
Yeah. Well, so let's just go back over them to really, so that you slow down and really give them. So giving gifts is one of a love language. So it's just one thing to pay attention to is if you really love somebody or you want to express acknowledgement or gratitude or any form of love, if you have a tendency to want to buy them something right away, there's a really good chance that your love language is gifts. Then there's another opportunity. If when you really love someone, this would be true for me, and you shower them with words, whether the spoken word or the written word, you love to leave little cards or notes or things like that, there's a really good chance that your love language is words. If you like to do things for people, and this would be Donna's love language, is acts of service is another love language so if you want to show somebody that you love them, you do the dishes and you clean up around the house or you wash the car or you clean up around the yard and you're doing it from a place of showing appreciation or acknowledgement for that person, it's likely that your love language is acts of service. If you, by showing someone love, you just want to spend time with them, let's go for a walk in the park, or let's have some quality time, or if that's a really meaningful way for you to show love, quality time, being with each other, then it's a good chance that your love language is quality time. And then the last one is physical touch. Now, I love holding hands. So I love, and you've even seen some of the videos, I'm the one with my arm around Donna or holding her hand. So not today, yeah, it's the other way around. Good job, Dee. But one of the ways of showing love is holding hands or putting your arm around the person, or even if you're not in an intimate relationship with them. Notice this: if you go to acknowledge someone and tell them you appreciate them, and you have a tendency to put your hand on their back or have some form of contact when you're engaged with them, there's a good chance that your love language is physical touch. So the second tip for today is knowing what your love language is. And here's why that's so important, is knowing how you express love, whether it's one or two of the love languages, and you may have a primary and a secondary. My primary is words, my secondary is touch. Then that is how you also receive love. So I'm just going to slow down. How you express love through one of the 5 love languages is also how you receive love. And that's going to be really important to understand, as we go into the next piece.
3.
So let's go to number 3.
So number 3 is look at where you find yourself saying, "You never tell me you love me."
So I love telling stories, and I'll be as authentic about the stumbling blocks of Donna and I's relationship as I possibly can, and especially on a recorded video. But I have a tendency early on in our relationship to tell Donna, "You never tell me you love me. Why don't you ever tell me you love me? Can't you just tell me you love me?" I mean, you can imagine how many different ways I can phrase that to make her wrong, interestingly enough.
Or getting resentful.
Or bitter or angry. And so she would look at me like I was a freak show. So when I would say that, she's like, what are you talking about? And so in understanding, in watching her reaction, I'm like, "Well, you never tell me." And "I tell you all the time." "How?" "Well, I do the dishes, I'm taking care of your kids, I'm buying groceries, I'm doing the laundry, and I'm vacuuming." And I'm looking at her, and all of a sudden I realized, wow, she is expressing "I love you" through acts of service, which are actually her love language. And I just had to be honest with her and said, "Honey, as much as I appreciate all of that stuff, I'm not making that mean I love you. So it's not translating for me. Now I appreciate it, so don't stop doing it. But it doesn't mean I love you to me." And so conversely, I have been telling her for years, "I love you, honey. I love you, honey. I love you, honey." And in some ways she can receive that and she gets it. But the only way she's actually going to hear "I love you" is if I speak it in her language. So one of the things that I've learned the hard way is to actually make sure that I say "I love you" through acts of service. So one of the ways that I can knock it out of the park with Don is to do the dishes, to do the laundry, to vacuum, to make the bed, to pick up my clothes. Now those things don't mean "I love you" to me. They don't mean that. They just mean, look, be a good steward of the house and be a good partner. But in Donna's listening, because it's expressed in her love language, she's hearing "I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you" every time I do one of those acts of service.
Yeah, and he was so sweet because, I was on vacation last week. I just went by myself to visit family and friends and stuff. And so I come home and I kind of have an idea that when I get home, the house will be dirty. There'll be dishes in the sink. I'm expecting that. That's okay. But this time when I got home, he had spent time vacuuming. He had done the dishes. He had done the laundry. It was so awesome to come home. And I just felt so appreciated and so loved. Not only, that the physical stuff was done, but that really what happened was he got into my head and he recognized what would mean the most to me. And he, took the time out of his time to go do that stuff. And that was just incredibly meaningful to me.
Yeah, and I don't want to pretend like that's second nature for me. Again, we've been married for 30 years, so you would think that we would have this down and it would always just happen this way, and it doesn't. I still have to be really purposeful. And so since she told that story of so recent, it was just this last week, the thing that you should know is I was so excited for her to come home because I'm not used to being left home alone. I leave home all the time and she's home alone a lot, but I don't. She doesn't travel much and I do. And so I'm just so excited to tell her that I love her and I miss her. And as I'm rehearsing that in my head, I can't wait to tell her I love her and I miss her, speaking my love language. I immediately went, wait a minute, that's not going to work. I actually need to go home because I was on a fly fishing stream. I need to go home. I need to get off the stream early. I need to go home and I need to take care of all of those things and let that say I love you. And then the other piece that you should know about this story is when I went to pick her up at the airport, I just wanted to tell her, oh, honey, I did the dishes for you. I vacuumed. I took care of the horses. I wanted to tell her all the things that I did, and that would have ruined it. And I just had to not say anything. I told her, I love you, I miss you, and I had to not say anything. And when we got to the driveway, again, I had to squelch my desire to tell her how good I was by showing her love language and just let her experience it. So not saying a word, but just letting her experience I love you, I think was also very important as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk about, I mean, we're kind of off track here a little bit, but this is an important story. Talk about changing the intimacy level of your relationship. So that story that we just told you, the really fresh one from last week, that is a huge contribution to us having an incredibly intimate and close weekend based on her coming back. Mm-hmm. And so just something else to keep in mind. We better keep going.
So number 4 is identifying what your spouse's love language is, which I think we pretty much were telling all during the story, which is, I have to be very conscious that I'm not just giving love in the love language that's comfortable for me. I had to step up and study what John's love language is and remember that doing the dishes and cleaning the house and all that stuff is really not what's going to speak to him and not what's going to be meaningful to him. So I have to consciously be aware all the time that his is words, so giving him encouragement. When he tells me something, just saying, that's great, honey, you're really moving forward in that area. Or just holding his hand and giving him physical attention and looking him in the eye and just giving him his love language. And that's part of me stepping beyond myself and seeing what his need is.
Yeah. So again, you have to identify what your love language is, and then you really need to identify what your spouse's love language is. And in an ideal world, or your partner, however it shows up, in an ideal world, you're both watching these videos, and I get that might not be the case, that there might just be one of you watching these videos. And so if your partner isn't doing this with you and isn't able to help you identify the love language, here's the thing to do is just watch. Like, watch this person walk through life, and when they show love, what is it they're doing? And I'm also a professional coach, so I work with a lot of leaders, and I teach this same thing. Interestingly enough, I teach this same thing to leaders. If they really want to know how to motivate their staff, then watch how they express acknowledgement. We should be able to use the love in corporate world, the word love in corporate world more, but it's no different. If you watch how your staff expresses acknowledgement and says thank you, and you can identify their love language, and if you're a really conscious leader, then you can start saying thank you to them in their love language. So you don't actually need the other person to play this game. You can identify what their love language is and then commit to loving them in that language. Mm-hmm. Next step, right. Top 10.
Practice speaking the love language that your partner understands. So just going back to what we were saying is, once you've identified yours and your partner's, then it's just a matter of being conscious about it every single day and reminding yourself every single day, every week, what am I doing that's going beyond myself and that is meeting my partner's basic need for love in their language, not my language.
Yeah, and the key word here is practice. So anything worth doing, you have to do in a highly repetitive fashion. So I'm a big fan of having little Post-it notes around my computer monitor. I spend a lot of time on the computer. And those little Post-it notes are really great reminders. And so I have a little Post-it note on the right-hand corner of my monitor that says, what language are you speaking? And so because I apply this to not only my relationship with Donna, but my relationship with my adult children and my relationship with my clients, is I want to make sure that I'm constantly asking myself, am I speaking the right language? Because it's really easy to use my language, and it's a discipline and takes practice to speak another person's language. So you just have to keep practicing it.
Yeah, which goes along to the next one, which is to be patient with one another. If you've read the book together and you're really, on board with practicing it together, it just takes a lot of patience to realize that your partner is not going to get it right every single time. Your spouse isn't going to get it right every single time. There are going to be times when they totally forget that maybe you've been speaking their love language for weeks. It could be a long time, for weeks, and then all of a sudden you realize they haven't been doing anything for you. That's okay. It's all practice and giving each other space and giving each other time and being patient with your partner as they're practicing and learning what could possibly be a brand new skill for them.
Yeah, and it's one of those frustrating things where when the stakes are really high, like when there's a lot of pressure and, if there's financial pressure, whatever the pressure might be, that's when it's hardest to remember to speak the other person's love language.
When you're super busy, which most people are, you've got small children to deal with. A lot of times you're just focusing on the daily needs that are there. You're trying to get food on the table. You're trying to get all your errands done. You're trying to meet your kids' needs. And sometimes it's real easy to get in that space in life and just forget, or just feel like you don't have the energy to go ahead and do it.
But it's also the most valuable time to do it. So imagine if you can just slow your world down when you're under all those pressures, as Donna was describing. If you can just slow down a minute, look at the post-it note on your computer screen that's asking you what language you're speaking, and then go do that. Like, go speak the other person's language in the midst of those challenges. Lots of people come to us and say, how do we diffuse challenges? How do we get through fights? This is one of the tips that we give them. In the midst of that fight, or in the midst of that high energy situation, make sure that you're saying I love you in their language. It does miracles in taking the edge off those challenging communications.
It does. Yeah. And it's not necessarily a huge time commitment.
No.
I mean, for me, just to, stop doing the laundry, or stop doing the cleaning, or stop doing all the puttering around the house, and just to go downstairs where John is sitting in his office and just, go like this and just go, oh, honey, I appreciate you working so hard. Thank you so much. And then you go about your day. And what does that do for you?
Well, it's dramatically different. It completely changes how I show up in the world. I mean, it would be wonderful if I could be always 100% accountable for my mood, right? If I never got into a low mood and I never have difficult days, I would love that. And I would never lie to you to say that I don't have challenges. I do. But when Donna will express that kind of love, it translates into my being, and then that translates into everything that I do. So imagine Donna, and she does this. She's beautiful about this. She'll come down into my office, she'll do that, and then my next call is with a customer. So I'm a professional coach, right? And so my next call is with that person. Imagine how differently I show up with that individual after having just received that. That's the kind of impact you can be having on your partner, and then whatever they're out doing in the world, it just gets radiated outwards. This is a really important thing. You can tell we're pretty passionate about it, or at least I am.
So our next point is to not make it a demand on your spouse. So just really important not to go up to your spouse and say, you haven't been meeting my love language for the last month, and I've been doing all this stuff for you. It's kind of like that little story that John told. He could have picked me up from the airport and then just spent the time on the way home saying, oh, honey, you wouldn't believe what I did for you. I vacuumed for you, and I did the dishes for you. And it just, it's your ego speaking, really. Yeah, and so right. Just to wait, and just to be patient, and just to recognize that you don't need to demand it. Just keep on doing the love language. And I think at some point, your spouse will recognize it. But if not, you could start a loving conversation and just say, honey, I'm really feeling like I need to speak to you about this one area that I feel like is in need of mine. Can we talk about this together?
Yeah, and many of you listening to this, because of the community that you're in within Theos, know of Steve Chandler. And Steve has a really great audio on, I think it's an audio, it might be a video, but I'm pretty sure it's an audio on expectations versus agreements. You can't make having your partner speak your love language an expectation. You just can't. You will be so disappointed, so frustrated, and so angry. But if you can put it in the world of agreement, like if you can have an agreement with your partner, Donna and I have an agreement to speak each other's love language.
Well, we agreed to read the book together. We agreed that our marriage needed a lot of help, and we agreed that we wanted to work on it together. So that was our first agreement, was, okay, let's read this book together. And then, our second agreement was to give each other space to be able to practice this. We recognized that it was really necessary, and we wanted to try it. Yeah. I mean, how would you not want to try something that someone says is going to work in your marriage? And so that was part of our initial agreement, and then it just kind of cascades from there.
But you have to keep it out of the land of expectation. It just won't work as an expectation. So I guess is the key point. Mm-hmm. Next one, number 9.
You kind of discussed it already, is that love languages can apply to all your other relationships. So the other thing we did as soon as we had the aha moment of, oh my gosh, love languages, well, let's try and figure out what our own kids' love language is. And so that was, one step. What are your parents' love languages? What are your siblings' love languages? What is your boss's love language? Your coworkers, anybody, your best friend. What are the relationships around you? What's their love language? So that you can really hone in on, my daughter's love language is gifts. And so I know that one of the most meaningful things to her, it doesn't even matter if I go buy something. Like if I bring her a bowl of my fresh grown lettuce, she loves that kind of thing. If I bring her a latte, or, it doesn't have to be super expensive. It's just something that speaks to her heart, is to just give her a little something when I arrive at her house.
Well, and I think the other piece that was transformational in this is your relationship with your mom.
Yeah.
And so Donna had a huge frustration with her parents, and one of the key things was learning how Donna understanding how Donna and Daphne, her parents, expressed love. And their expression of love was through gifts.
Yeah, my mom's.
Well, Donna wanted to hear it another way. Donna wanted to hear it a completely different way.
I wanted them to say, I love you to me.
Yeah, well into her adulthood, that was a big bone of contention. But once the aha moment came, then Donna was able to receive Daphne's love through those gifts. And she was able to translate that into, oh, Daphne's telling me she loves me.
It just takes all the energy off of it for me.
Exactly.
Once I understood, once we talked about it, and I said, my parents I don't know if it's part of their generation, or they just don't express love by saying, oh, we love you. They just never have. And so I always felt like there was this little missing hole in my heart. But then as we got to talking about it, well, what do they do for you? Gosh, they give us things. They give us gifts, they give us money, they give us photos, they just give us books. I don't know. They just give gifts. And so once I had that realization, it just took all the energy off of me saying, telling my own story, that my parents didn't love me. Once I understood what their expression of love was, I could really see, oh my gosh, they've been loving me all these years. I just didn't recognize the form that it was coming in.
Really important. Number 10, and again, we've kind of been touching on this throughout this video, is start giving love in the other person's language. So I'm going to go all the way back to my introduction. You're in partnership or relationship. You're going to a foreign land. You're immersing yourself in the culture of that other person. That means that you need to learn their language. And that means you need to use their language. You've got to start expressing I love you in a language they can really hear. So I hope that's been clear and valuable for you, these top 10. As always, I have homework for you. I'm a big believer in homework, and this is going to show up in 3 stages. So first, I'd love you, whether you get the book or however you go about it, I want you to identify what your love language is. I would like you to identify what your partner's love language is. And then for 30 days, I want you to say I love you, express your love for your partner in their language. So just for 30 days, I want you to practice it. I want you to notice what the results are, how their reaction is. I will tell you, we had a couple in our living room on Friday night. We gave them this simple homework, this same homework, and I got an email, let's see, today is Wednesday. I got an email yesterday that said those have been the best 4 days of their entire relationship, because they majored on saying I love you in their partner's language. So great homework. Would love to hear you what experiences you have with it. Remember, DNN Wittry, DNNWITTRY@gmail.com. Would love to hear what's happening with these, and look forward to seeing you on the next video.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, bye-bye.